The man who felt nothing. They say Viktor Markov had ice where his heart should be. For 17 years, that reputation served him well. Men twice his size lowered their eyes when he entered a room. Police commissioners took his calls. Judges remembered his generosity. And those who forgot their place, well, the city had many rivers and Viktor had many men. On that November evening, as frozen rain began to fall across the gray streets, Viktor sat in the back of his armored Mercedes, watching the world pass by through tinted glass. He had just finished a meeting that would cost 3 men their lives by morning. He felt nothing about it. That was the secret to survival in his world. Feel nothing. Want nothing except power. Trust no one except yourself. His driver, Emil, navigated through the evening traffic while his chief bodyguard, Sergei, sat in the passenger seat, reviewing security details on his phone. In the back, Viktor loosened his silk tie and stared at the rain streaking down the window like tears on a stranger's face. He was 43 years old. He owned 11 buildings in this city. He controlled the ports, the gambling, the loans that kept desperate men awake at night. He had everything a man could want, and he had no one. His phone buzzed. A message from his brother, Alexei, the only family he had left. Missed you at dinner again. Mother's anniversary. Remember? Viktor closed his eyes. Of course he remembered. 26 years since the cancer took her. 26 years since he held her hand in that cold hospital room while his father drank himself unconscious somewhere across the city. 26 years since he promised her he would take care of Alexei, no matter what. He had kept that promise. Alexei lived in a beautiful house now, far from this world. His children went to private schools. His wife wore diamonds. He never had to know where the money came from. Viktor typed back, working. Next year. He always said next year. The car slowed at a red light on Vasiliev Street, near the old industrial district where abandoned factories stood like tombstones of a forgotten era. This was not a neighborhood where Mercedes stopped. Even the homeless here had learned to find shelter elsewhere. But not everyone. Viktor's attention drifted to the sidewalk, where the sodium streetlight cast its sickly orange glow on the cracked concrete. At first, he thought he was seeing a bundle of rags discarded against the wall. Then the bundle moved. The girl who wouldn't let go. She couldn't have been more than 12. Her coat was 3 sizes too big, held together by safety pins and prayers. Her hair, dark and matted, fell across a face too thin, too pale, too old for her years. But it wasn't her appearance that made Viktor lean forward in his seat. It was what she was carrying. In her arms, she held a small boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, wrapped in what looked like a torn blanket. His head lolled against her shoulder, and even from the car, Viktor could see the flush of fever on his cheeks, the way his small body shook with each labored breath. The girl was trying to walk, but her legs kept buckling. She would stumble, catch herself, adjust her grip on the boy, and take another step, then another. Then she would almost fall again. People walked past her. A man in a business suit, a woman pushing a stroller, a group of teenagers laughing at something on their phones. They all looked. They all kept walking. Sir. Sergei had noticed Viktor watching. Lights green. Viktor didn't respond. The girl stumbled again, harder this time. Her knee hit the pavement, but she twisted her body to keep the boy from falling, taking the impact on her own shoulder instead. For a moment, she stayed there, on her knees, rain soaking through her thin coat, and Viktor saw something that made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. She wasn't crying. She was getting back up. Stop the car. Sergei turned. Sir. This isn't. Stop the car. Emil pulled to the curb. Sergei's hand moved toward his weapon, his eyes scanning the empty street for threats. Victor, please. This could be a setup. A distraction. Victor opened his door. Then stay alert. He stepped out into the rain. The girl saw him coming and froze. Her arms tightened around her brother. Victor could see now that they had the same sharp chin, the same dark eyes, and she took a step back. Then another. But she couldn't run. She could barely stand. Victor stopped 10 feet away. He had spent his life making men afraid, but standing there in his $1,000 coat while a starving child looked at him like he was death itself, he felt something shift inside him. What's your name? His voice came out rougher than he intended. The girl didn't answer. Her eyes darted to the car, to Sergei's silhouette behind the glass, back to Victor. I'm not going to hurt you. It was a sentence he had never said before. Your brother, he's sick? Her chin trembled, but she lifted it defiantly. He just needs rest. We're fine. You're not fine. You're carrying him in the rain, and you can barely stand. I said we're fine. Victor took a slow step closer. The girl flinched but didn't run. Couldn't run. What happened to him? For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice so small it nearly disappeared into the rain, he started coughing last week. Then the fever came. I tried to get him to the clinic, but they wanted papers. We don't have papers. I tried the church, but it was closed. I tried. Her voice broke. I've been trying. Victor looked at the boy. His breathing was shallow, ragged. The fever was high enough that he could see the heat radiating off him even in the cold. This wasn't a cold. This wasn't something that would pass with rest and soup. This was a child dying. What's his name? Misha. And yours? She hesitated. Anya. Victor nodded. Then he took off his coat. Cashmere, Italian, worth more than most people made in a month, and held it out to her. Put this around him. We need to keep him warm. Anya stared at the coat like it might bite her. Why are you helping us? It was a good question. The smart question. Victor didn't have an answer. Because no one else is, he said finally. And he needs help now. She looked at her brother's pale face, at the way his lips had started to turn blue at the edges. Then, slowly, she took the coat. Victor turned to the car. Emil, the hospital on Leninsky Prospect. Call ahead. Tell them Victor Markov is bringing a patient, and I expect the best doctor they have waiting at the door. Sergei was out of the car now, his face a mask of professional concern. Victor, you can't be serious. You're bringing street children to. I'm bringing a sick child to a hospital. Victor's voice dropped to the temperature of the rain. Question me again, and you'll be looking for new employment. Sergei closed his mouth. Victor turned back to Anya. Can you walk to the car? Or do you need help? I can walk. She took a step and nearly collapsed. Victor caught her elbow, and for a moment, they stood there. The most feared man in the city and a 12-year-old girl who weighed less than his arm, holding each other up in the rain. Let me carry him, Victor said. Just to the car. You can sit right next to him. Anya's arms tightened around Misha. Every instinct she had was screaming at her not to trust the stranger. But her brother was burning up, and she had been walking for 3 hours, and her arms had stopped feeling anything 20 minutes ago. Slowly, she let Victor take him. Misha weighed almost nothing. That was the thought that hit Victor as he cradled the boy against his chest. A child this age should be heavy, should be full of energy and life. This boy was hollow, empty. Like me, Victor thought. And then, immediately, no, not like me. This one still has a chance. He carried Misha to the car and slid into the back seat, keeping the boy in his arms. Anya climbed in beside him, her eyes never leaving her brother's face. "It's going to be okay," Victor heard himself say. He didn't know if it was true, but for the first time in 17 years he wanted it to be. The ghost he carried. The doctors worked through the night. Victor sat in the private waiting room he had demanded, watching Anya sleep on the leather couch across from him. She had fought it for hours, refusing to close her eyes, refusing to eat the food he had ordered, refusing to trust him even as she accepted his help. But exhaustion had finally won. She looked younger when she slept, more like the child she should have been, less like the old woman the world had forced her to become. Sergei appeared in the doorway. "The doctor wants to see you." Victor followed him down the corridor to a small office where Dr. Petrov, the hospital's chief of pediatrics, sat behind a cluttered desk. The doctor was in his 60s, white-haired, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything. "The boy has pneumonia," Dr. Petrov said without preamble. "Severe. If you had brought him in 6 hours later, we would be having a very different conversation." Victor felt something cold wrap around his chest. But now he has a chance. A good chance if he responds to the antibiotics. He's malnourished, dehydrated, and his immune system is compromised. But he's young. Children are resilient. The doctor paused. More resilient than they should have to be. Victor nodded slowly. "Whatever he needs. Whatever she needs. The best room, the best food, the best care. Send all bills to me." Dr. Petrov studied him for a long moment. "May I ask why?" "No." But after Victor left the office and walked back toward the waiting room, the question followed him. Why? He thought of his mother, lying in a hospital bed not so different from the one where Misha now fought for his life. He thought of how she had squeezed his hand and made him promise to be good, to take care of Alexei, to remember that the world could be kind if he let it. He had failed her. Every day for 17 years he had failed her. He thought of his father, Dmitri, who had sold his soul to the organization long before Victor was born, who had come home smelling of vodka and other women's perfume, who had taught Victor that power was the only thing worth having, and mercy was a weakness that got men killed. Victor had learned those lessons well, too well. He thought of himself at 12 years old, standing over his father's body in the warehouse where the old man's debts had finally caught up to him. He thought of the choice he had made that night, to take his father's place, to climb higher than the old man ever had, to become the thing that people feared because fear was safer than love. He had been right. Fear was safer. But standing in that sterile corridor, thinking about a little girl who had carried her brother through the rain because she refused to let him die alone, Victor realized something. Being safe wasn't the same as being alive. The price of kindness. 3 days later, Misha opened his eyes. Victor was there when it happened. He had been there every day, sitting in the chair by the window, reading reports on his phone while Anya sat beside her brother's bed, holding his hand. She had barely spoken to Victor in those 3 days. She accepted his help, his money, his protection, but she didn't trust him. He didn't blame her. "Anya?" Misha's voice was weak, barely a whisper. Anya burst into tears. She gathered her brother into her arms and held him like she would never let go, sobbing into his hair while he patted her back with small, confused hands. "It's okay," he kept saying. "It's okay, Anya. I'm okay." Victor stood and walked to the door. This was a private moment. He didn't belong. But Misha's voice stopped him. "Anya? Who's that man?" Victor turned. Misha was looking at him with wide, curious eyes. The eyes of a child who had been taught to fear strangers but hadn't yet learned to hate them. Before Victor could speak, Anya answered. He's the one who saved you. Her voice was still thick with tears, but there was something else in it now. Something that might have been the beginning of trust. He's the one who brought us here. Misha smiled. A weak, trembling smile, but a smile nonetheless. Thank you, he said to Victor. It was 2 words. 2 simple words that Victor had heard 1,000 times from 1,000 people who didn't mean them. But this time, standing in that hospital room with the morning light streaming through the windows, Victor felt them hit him somewhere deep. You're welcome, he said, and he meant it. The peace lasted 11 days. Victor had moved the children to a safe house. A small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the dangerous streets where they had survived for so long. He had hired a woman named Katia to look after them, a former teacher who had lost her own children to a car accident years ago and who had been waiting, without knowing it, for someone new to love. He visited when he could. Not often, his world was still his world, and he couldn't change that overnight, but enough. Enough to see Misha's cheeks fill out. Enough to see Anya start to smile. Enough to start imagining a future he had never thought he wanted. Then the message came. It arrived in the form of a photograph, delivered to his desk by a courier who disappeared before Victor's men could catch him. The photograph showed Anya and Misha walking to school. The school Victor had enrolled them in just last week. Behind them, barely visible in the corner of the frame, was a man Victor knew. Konstantin Volkov, his second in command, his most trusted lieutenant. The message on the back of the photograph was simple. Weakness is death. Remember who you are. Victor stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he made a phone call. The choice. They met at midnight, in the warehouse where Victor's father had died 29 years ago. Konstantin was waiting when Victor arrived, flanked by 6 men with guns. Victor came alone. You shouldn't have come without protection, Konstantin said. That's another weakness. I came without protection because I wanted to talk. Talk, Konstantin laughed. The great Victor Markov talking like a diplomat. What happened to you? A month ago you would have sent 12 men to kill me in my sleep. Now you come to negotiate. What do you want, Konstantin? I want you to remember who you are. I want you to remember what made this organization strong. For 17 years, we've ruled this city because our enemies knew that crossing us meant death. No mercy, no hesitation, no attachments. Konstantin stepped closer, his eyes hard. Then you find 2 street rats, and suddenly you're playing father? Suddenly you have something people can use against you. Victor's voice was quiet. They're children. They're leverage. Konstantin pulled out his phone, showed Victor a live video feed. The safe house. Katia sitting in the living room, unaware of the camera. Anya reading to Misha in the next room. My men are in position. 1 word from me and those children disappear. 1 word and we find out how much the great Victor Markov really cares. Victor looked at the feed. At Anya's face, peaceful for the first time since he had met her. At Misha's smile as he listened to his sister read. He thought about the choice in front of him. He could go back to being the man he had been. Cold, empty, safe. He could let Konstantin win, let the children go, let the ice reform around his heart. It would be easy. It would be survival. Or, you're right, Victor said. I do have a weakness now. Konstantin smiled, victorious. But you're wrong about one thing. Victor met his eyes. You think having something to lose makes me weaker. It doesn't. It makes me more dangerous than I have ever been. Because I'm not fighting for money anymore. I'm not fighting for power. I'm fighting for them. And there is nothing I won't do to protect them. Constantine's smile faltered. Before you came here tonight, Victor continued, I made some calls to the Gregorov family, to the Petrov syndicate, to every man in our organization who has ever wanted a piece of what you have. I told them what you were planning. I told them you were trying to take over. I told them that if anything happened to those children, they would split your territories among themselves with my blessing. Constantine's face went pale. You're bluffing. Check your phone. Constantine looked. His hands began to shake. Your men outside? Victor said. They work for me now. Your accounts? Frozen as of an hour ago. Your allies? They were never really your allies. They were waiting for you to make a mistake. Victor stepped forward until they were face to face. I'm giving you a choice, Constantine. The same choice I just made. You can disappear. Leave this city. Never come back. Live out your life somewhere far away, with whatever money you have hidden under your mattress. Or, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Constantine looked at the phone in his hand, at the messages piling up, at the empire he had thought he was about to inherit, crumbling around him. This isn't over, he whispered. Yes, Victor said. It is. The light after. The adoption was finalized on a Tuesday in spring. Victor stood in the courthouse, wearing a suit that cost more than most cars, feeling more nervous than he had ever felt in his life. Beside him, Anya held Misha's hand, both of them dressed in new clothes that actually fit, both of them looking at Victor with expressions he still couldn't quite believe. Trust, hope, love. Are you sure about this? The judge asked, looking at Victor over her glasses. You understand the responsibilities you're taking on? I do. And you, children? Do you want this man to be your legal guardian? Misha nodded eagerly, but it was Anya who spoke. He saved my brother's life, she said. He saved both of us. He didn't have to. Nobody else even stopped. But he did. She looked up at Victor, and for the first time since that rainy night on Vasiliev Street, she smiled at him. A real smile. A daughter's smile. He's not like other people think he is. He's good. Victor felt his throat tighten. The judge signed the papers. Later that night, Victor stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the city lights. He was still a powerful man. He still controlled the ports, the gambling, the loans. Some things couldn't change overnight, but other things could. He had started moving money into legitimate businesses. He had begun making calls to men who could help him exit the world he had built. It would take time, years maybe, but for the first time in his life he was looking forward to those years. The door opened behind him, and Anya stepped out onto the balcony. Misha's asleep, she said. He wanted me to tell you good night. Victor nodded. Good night, Misha, he said to the city. Anya came to stand beside him, her small shoulder almost touching his arm. I didn't trust you, she said quietly. That first night. I thought you were going to hurt us. I know. Why did you help us? Really? Victor thought about the question. About his mother. About his father. About the choices he had made and the ones he hadn't. Because when I saw you carrying your brother, he said finally, I remembered what it felt like to love someone more than yourself. I had forgotten. For a long time. But you reminded me. Anya was quiet for a moment. I used to pray, she said. When things were really bad, I used to pray for someone to help us. I stopped believing anyone would. But then you came. She looked up at him. Maybe prayers do get answered, just not the way we expect. Victor put his hand on her shoulder. It felt awkward and unfamiliar. He wasn't used to touching people without violence, but also, somehow, exactly right. Maybe they do, he said. They stood there together, the former mafia boss and the child who had saved him, watching the city lights flicker like stars fallen to earth. In the room behind them, Misha slept peacefully, dreaming of nothing. And Victor Markov, the man who had felt nothing for 17 years, felt something new rising in his chest. It wasn't ice. It was warmth.